Hello everyone, Joe from Central Jersey Conrail and N-Scale, and welcome back. This is episode 16. So this episode, we're going to be showing how I put together the Toms River Industrial and the Ciba Geigy plant. So this episode is really just going to be an overview on how that section of the layout was built, kind of from beginning to end. And it's going to show, I'm not really going to get into the details of how I put the switches in and how I soldered rails and stuff. It's kind of just an overview. So you can sit back and you can see how all of the steps that we just did in episode 15, part 1, 2, and 3, how they look when they're all done. And it's a nice piece because it's all, it's that small area and we chronicle from beginning to end, so you can kind of see it all in one episode. So over the last couple of weeks while I've been working on that section, I've been doing the video, I've also been doing research, and I've kind of hit the jackpot when it's come to the Ciba Geigy facility. I found a website called colorhistorian.org, and it's a website kind of devoted to the industry of making dyes and the history of it and the different companies involved. And I reached out to the administrator of the page, kind of just a shot in the dark, and said, hey, this is what I'm doing, can you help me out? And he was nice enough to respond back, and he gave me some links to some very vital documents. One he gave me was the draft environmental study that was published in August 8th, 1999, and that was the briefing document that Ciba Geigy drafted to present to the public when they were starting the cleanup process at the Superfund site. So in there it has a lot of information. The other thing that I found was a book, Toms River. It's written by Dan Fagan. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner for this book, and it kind of goes into the history of Toms River, and it discusses a lot of things that I didn't realize, and it talks about the cancer cluster that was involved in Toms River and the possible links to the Ciba Geigy facility, and also other industrial incidents that occurred down there that may have led to that as well. But he also talked about the facility itself and the history of how it was built, and also had some good interviews with some of the people who worked at the facility. So I found that to be also a secondary source of really good information. And the last document that I got from Robert over at colorhistorian.org was Industrial and Engineering Chemistry, and it was published in June of 1954, and it was actually written by one of the lead chemists over at Ciba Geigy and Toms River, and it totally went into the South Dye production area where they made the vat dyes, and went into the process of how they do that and talked about all the chemicals involved. And it was very interesting, because I got some insight on how the facility was laid out. There was some vital information in that article, and I'll point that out and show you. Okay, so after I was able to get that information and I read through it and kind of digested it for a couple days, I made a couple changes to the model of the Ciba Geigy facility. I actually added a building. I renamed all the buildings proper as they were named by Ciba Geigy according to the draft environmental document. So after getting all this information, and digesting it and making the changes to the facility on the model, I got to start thinking, this is a very controversial subject. There was a lot of people who got sick in Toms River, and there was a lot of people who got sick at the facility. And if there's anybody in Toms River who was watching this video or who grew up in Toms River and experienced this, I'm presenting this information as a kind of historical retrospective. I'm not going to take sides. You make your own determination. I presented the evidence. There's plenty of other people who presented the evidence, and you decide. I'm merely presenting this model of Ciba Geigy because I believe that it's vital to the history of the rails in South Jersey. So that's kind of why I'm doing it. So I'm kind of putting this information up there, but I'm treading lightly because some people may interpret that I'm supporting one side or the other. So I just want to kind of put that out there and just kind of clear the air. So if there's anybody who's watching this, they know that I'm not doing this to be vindictive. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So with that being said, why don't you go sit back and watch how we put the facility together, and afterwards we'll come back and I'll discuss all this information that I learned.
Okay, so here we are getting started. First thing I do is I start laying all the buildings on a piece of masonite. And once I get a good feel for where everything lays, I lay out the brown craft paper and start tracing for my template for my sub-road bed. So I know I got so many comments on the music selection last video I did, so we're just going to use the same music as last time, so enjoy. So you may have noticed the one big building over to the right, I had to remove the section off the rear, and then the big distribution building, I had to cut that down to make it fit. So here we are getting started with the sub-road bed. Again, the sub-road bed, it's 1/2-inch birch plywood. Very happy with it. It's worth the money. I haven't had any issues with the sub-road bed that I've put down on the previous section. So. As you can see, I'm just taking the time to make sure that the clearance is good over the helix so that my double stacks can go through, and making sure everything's level before I start screwing it together. Yeah, so that double stack in that last scene almost took the dive. But anyway, here we are getting started connecting the upper level of the Toms River Industrial down to the main line. So the only way I could figure out to do this was to do this incline S-curve. And it was a little spongy, so that's why I'm putting that center support in that you can see there. What I want to recommend to everyone is if you're doing a track plan that has a reversing S-curve like this, make sure that there's a break in it that has a little bit of a straight section in the middle, because what that allows to do is it allows your cars to, stabilize and recenter themselves before they start doing that other turn. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of derailments. So here we are installing the fascia. And don't forget I did the fascia in all one piece all the way around. So that's why I don't have track installed on the Toms River Industrial, but I'm doing the fascia now. So here we are getting started on doing track work. So this first turnout right off of the where the section begins to the left of your screen, because it was over that helix, I had to use another remote actuator by Circuitron, and it works really well. They're a little difficult to deal with if you haven't done them at first. There's a lot of parts and a lot of steps to putting them in, but once you get it in, it is so worth the time. It works very well. The other big thing you may notice here is that I'm not using any cork road bed. And that was because some of the pictures that I've seen in the past where the track was inside the Ciba Geigy facility, it was very flat. There was no real drainage relief on the sides. It was very sandy. So that's the look I'm going to be going for, and I figured the best way to do that was just do away with the cork road bed and lay the track straight down on the plywood. Now, I'm not too concerned because, the train's going to be running slow and in and out of the facility, so I'm not really worried about noise. So, not having the cork, I don't think is going to work against me. So again, the more track I'm laying down, the more I'm learning. Just take your time and make sure all those joints are good. It'll pay benefits in the end. so I really adapted this track plan from the aerial photography off of historical aerials, and also from the ZTS maps from Conrail. And I tweaked it a little bit, but just left the flavor of the facility with the two mains and the crossovers and the various spots where they put the cars. But it's, it still is very different from the actual facility. And oh yes, if you do decide to do what I'm doing here and using those C-clamps to hold your track, do not torque down on them because you will ruin that track. I just did it very gently. So as you're watching this track plan come together and this facility being, mocked up, this could be a really good shelf layout for somebody. If you had like maybe 6 or 7 feet, 24 inches off, maybe even 18 inches off the wall, you could really represent the facility well, because it's with a straight 2 tracks all the way through, and you put in a bunch of crossovers. It would make a really good switching shelf layout. I don't know. There's an idea for the future, maybe. So right here's a good view. You can see that little break I put in those 2 curves of that reverse S. So that gives those cars the ability to recenter themselves before the next turn, so you're not jumping the track. Because if the 2 curves were continuous together, they'll create issues with your tracking. So here I'm priming the fascia to get ready for paint, and you can see I put that nice little curve in there because that was the only way I could really figure how to blend the Thomson River Industrial into the existing fascia. And I didn't want any real jagged corners. I'm putting together one of the switches for the panel. This panel was fairly simple. It had 4 switches to tie in the 5 tortoises. One of the switches was the first time I did it with a crossover. I tied the 2 tortoises to the 1 switch control, and then I used the bicolor LEDs that I got from DigiKey, so that and they're all controlled together. This is the first time that I used the bicolor LEDs, and it took me a little figuring out to do, but it really wasn't that hard. They still have the red and the black leads off of the LED, and all it is, when the polarity is switched, it just changes it from green to red or red to green. So, and then I just wired those in series with the tortoise switch machine. So here we are putting the panel together and wiring everything together. So there's the crossover with the bicolor LEDs. So all in all, the panel came together really nice. The whole section came out really great. I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. So happy with the design. It's going to be fun to operate.
Okay, so that's how we put together the facility. So now let's go over this new information and I'll show you the changes that I've made. So this on this map. So if you look at this map, the facility is broken down into 3 production lines. The yellow indicates the azo die production facility. The green indicates the vat die facility, and the blue indicates the resin production area. Now, Ciba Geigy was constructed in 1952. Sometime in the early 60s, they added onto the facility and built the azo die facility, production area. Then in the mid 60s, they constructed the resin and plastics production area. Okay, so the reason I point this out to you is this. So according to the map, the large building, which I thought was a distribution warehouse, was actually correct. That's where all the materials came in for the South Die facility where they made the vat dies. And then right behind here was building 102, 103, and 104, and that was the South Die production buildings where they actually made the vat dies. Once the production line shut down in 1983, they continued to use those buildings. They still received materials there, but they were making the precursors for the azo dies, which were in the North Die facility. This building here that I thought was actually a production building turned out to be a steam plant. So it's a very interesting steam plant because it was built, this smaller building was built in the 1950s. And it was produced, it was made so that they could produce steam. I think they said 150 pounds PSI superheated steam, but they could use either fuel oil or they could use crushed coal. So back in the 50s, they had deliveries of crushed coal, and it actually, I found on the Conrail ZTS maps that they actually had a dump chute here. And these round circles that I drew on the top of the building that represents what I thought were tanks were actually coal bunkers. So they would put the crushed coal up into the bunkers and store it there for the steam plant. Or if they wanted to, they could shift over to fuel oil, which they had in storage tanks here on this side of the tracks. But when they added the azo die production line, which was in the North Die facility, they added on to the steam plant, and that was the larger building. That was the newer section of the steam facility, and it raised its ability to make more steam. But then sometime in the late 60s, early 70s, they lost, they didn't do any more coal-fired steam. They did mostly fuel oil. So, but the coal bunkers were still there right up until the facility was torn down. So that's what this building's going to be. And I'm going to leave it here, and I'm still going to use it because it's such a key structure when you look at the pictures, because it was just such a tall building. It stood out. The other thing I found out about the water tower, I'm probably a little overscale here. The water tower was actually 160 feet long. In the book Tom's River, they talked about that Greenpeace climbed up to the top to hang a banner. So that's how I found out that it was 160 feet long. So the other change I made over here, this I had incorrectly labeled as building 800. I found these numbers in the ZTS map and it didn't correspond to anything at Ciba Geigy. But this building here is now building 108, and that's where the resins were made. So, and then this building here, the big one here is 105. The steam plant doesn't have a building number, so I'm just going to call it the steam plant. Okay, so from this angle you can see that I've added building 108, and in order to disguise the entrance to the helix, what I've done is I've taken Route 37 and extended it onto a bridge to cover the hole where the trains are going to go down to the helix. So throughout all this research, I still haven't been able to find any kind of like documents on what actual materials they were getting by rail, but I have been able to find out, what chemicals they were using in the production line. So, at the building 108, they would have been using materials like toluene, methyl ethyl ketone, isopropyl alcohol. Over at the South Dye facility, that was, if you're modeling it prior to 1983, they would have been using nitrobenzene, isopropyl alcohol, methanol, chlorobenzene. And in the North Dye production area, they would have been using sulfuric acid and some of the other same chemicals that they were using at the South Dye facility. The other material that I know that they were using a lot of was chlorine. They were using chlorine to treat the wastewater as it was being discharged. So I took a lot of liberty here, and I've decided that so the loads that I'm going to be getting by tank car, I'm definitely sulfuric acid tank cars, nitric acid tank cars. I'm going to be using chlorine tank cars. Also, because the toluene and the benzene products were all oil based, I'm going to be using a lot of tank cars for that. So again, we don't know how much of the materials they were using. I can tell you that they were in 1963. Ciba Geigy was the #1 resin producer in the nation, and they were also the #5 dye producer in the nation. So that's when the facility was at its peak. Okay, so that's the changes that I made to the facility. Now, you still have to take into account, I'm dealing with a limited space. So the whole North Dye facility, which would have been north of the steam plant, is not even being represented. So what I'm probably going to end up doing is probably putting a mirror here on the backdrop. So just to kind of give you, confuse the eye to make it look like it's bigger. So, and the facility still is in its mock-up phase. So, there was a lot of tanks that were around. There was a lot of piping. There wasn't really large tanks because most of their large tanks were underground, like in Building 108. There really was no above ground storage. It was all underground. So, but, there was lots of steam piping running to all the buildings. And don't forget, I have kind of, twisted the facility a little bit to fit in the space. So, like Building 108 is not orientated in the east-west direction like it was. It's kind of like on an angle. I'm doing you got to do the best you can. You got to fit it into the space that's available, but you still want to kind of make it believable, and so somebody looks at it and they can kind of say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that's going to wrap up episode 16. So just like I promised, I was going to go over the whole facility with everybody who was interested. So now, like I said, I'm going to take a little break on construction. That panel's all been wrapped up. The whole facility's running. I'm ready to start working, running some trains and testing out the traffic pattern. Okay, so one of the major changes that has happened here is that I had planned on using Decoder Pro 3's operation software to, kind of dictate and make my work orders and decide which cars were going to move where. It just total meltdown. I mean, the yard got packed full of cars. The sidings were empty. The software was only dispatching 3-car trains, and it was not what I wanted it to be. So I took all that time to build that program, and you know what? I just scrapped the whole thing. So what I've done is I've actually started working on my waybills. So I'm going to do, in my little break of construction videos here, I'm going to actually do the follow-up to the extra car video, and I'm going to do the waybills. Because I've already started filling some out and I got a good handle on how to do these waybills now, and I think I can. If anybody out there is having some problems figuring out these waybills too, I think I can point a little light on it. And also, I'm still going to do those op videos that I've been talking about. I'm going to do a video showing the SA37 running from Farmingdale down to Lakehurst. I'm going to do an SA39, which is the train that I made up just to service the Ciba Geigy facility. And let me tell you, this is going to be tough. It is a tough switch. I've gotten in here, down here, and spent a whole hour and a half, 2 hours just moving cars around in this little facility here, because it's a real neat switching puzzle, and you got to really think about it. So I'm kind of glad that I've made the determination to go ahead and split that job out and make a separate train to service this facility, because that's going to tie an operator. You know, maybe a more experienced operator than myself might be able to get it done quicker. But, you know, if you put a novice over here, he's going to be over here for the whole operating session, because it's tough. It really is. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of fun. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Look for the upcoming episodes on the channel, and thanks for watching.